Hi, I'm Jess, part-time Hobbit, and I'm here to talk to you about Tolkien. I am here with some very special guests. This is my sister, I'm Kate, and this is my brother-in-law.
Hi, I'm Kobe.
AKA her husband. So today we're going to be going through some of the most famous battles from The Lord of the Rings, specifically the movies, and Kate and Kobe are here because they are experts. Why are you guys experts?
I think I'm a good person to talk about the tactics and doctrine of Lord of the Rings because I'm in the U.S. military as an armor officer, so I'm with the tanks.
And I'm also an officer in the Army, but I do intel stuff, so it's a little more strategic level, so I'll give some helpful overview with that, but it's definitely not going to be as in-depth on the small unit tactics as his opinions.
Kobe has notes. Notes.
At the end of the day, with all these different battle scenes, they do come to some of the fundamentals and characteristics of the offense and defense.
You also have to keep in mind that they don't have our modern technology, and we both work with mechanized vehicles, so it's a little bit different from what we're used to experiencing in the field.
So you got some guys.
Right. Heroes are on the defense, and the orcs or Uruk-hai are on the offense.
So he has the upper ground too, right?
It's too late. I have the high ground.
High ground only does so much when it's one versus that many, though.
When it comes to offense, there are 4 characteristics. You have surprise, concentration, audacity, and tempo. Surprise, they don't really have it. They know that they're coming. Concentration, they kind of have that because they have a lot of people. Audacity is how bold, audacious you're going to be in your attack. You're kind of pretty audacious.
Pretty audacious.
People. Tempo is essentially the pace of the battle, and whoever controls the pace of the battle is able to dictate when things will happen within the battle.
And so Aragorn, by using the staircase and leading them along, takes over the tempo for this fight.
Good to note that the Uruk-hai have a lack of decision-making skills, and due to that, they're not able to take that tempo back.
Different countries have different attitudes towards the decision-making process. For us, we have a lot more creative ability to make choices on the fly, while some other countries out there might have a stricter command relationship where they don't have that flexibility.
They have the numbers, but in this case it is more of like a hive mind, and that hive mind is proving less effective than one capable thinker.
So as you can see, he jumps down and, attacks the Uruk-hai. At that point, then the rest of his party comes in. So when it comes to the characteristics of the defense, you're going to have disruption, flexibility, maneuver, mass and concentration, operations in depth, preparation, and security. So when we take a look at these guys, they had some preparation. They have a lot of flexibility, as in they're able to maneuver anywhere throughout the battlefield, which is really key. And then they also have their operations in depth, which they utilize their characters throughout the area of the operation to mass their effects onto the enemy, which is very effective, as you can see here.
One of the interesting things about this is the Uruk-hai did surprise them in this fight. So these are things that as they've traveled along, they must have discussed, okay, so what is our plan if this were to happen? They pre-prepared all of these. They have their standard operating procedures, or what we call them, but they have those established and they know what to do in a fight so that they're most effective as a team as well, which is something that the Uruk-hai never work together, and orcs in general. They never work together as a team, and they don't have that.
Not only are they using this battle to move the plot forward, but it's also showing character development.
And again, you're seeing those SOPs, that the standard operating procedures that they have. The hobbits know to get behind Boromir in that.
And if you just look at the Uruk-hai, how spread out they are, they don't have that mass and concentration. Heroes are able to swiftly take care of all these Uruk-hai because they can take one down at a time. Rather than if they were massively concentrated onto the heroes, they wouldn't be able to react enough.
It's also important to note that the Uruk-hai are fresh orcs, so they haven't developed these relationships that the Fellowship have.
Well, and just any experience with anything at all. They probably are like, wow, look at that tree.
They're killing
cool.
toddlers. Oh no,
it's fine. Like we were talking about earlier, that hive mind decision making, the Uruk-hai achieved their goal of capturing the hobbits, but they lost so many on the way, and the Fellowship only lost one.
So on a scale from 1 to 10, how would each of you rate that in terms of tactical accuracy?
Probably put that at a 5 because it shows the benefits and drawbacks of these characteristics that the army has put out for us to learn, and if you don't utilize them from which we learn from history, then things can go awry, which clearly went awry because they lost a lot of people.
So mid.
Achieved the mission, but they didn't do the best job.
I'm gonna give it a 4, if only because the number of times that they left their backs exposed and the Uruk-hai did nothing. There were multiple opportunities that the Uruk-hai had that they could have taken more of the Fellowship, and they just didn't.
Once again,
Look at us, so bougie.
the heroes conducting a defense.
They have the high ground.
Preparation.
And the fortress.
Yeah.
Preparation is the most important part of
Yeah.
a defense, in my opinion. To go into the preparation aspect, I want to talk about EA development. Engagement area development essentially means your engagement area where you decide to kill the enemy and how you develop it on essentially utilizing your forces. So you got several steps, right? You got the first step, identify the enemy avenue of approach. So they know where the enemy's coming from. Mm-hmm. The second step, identify the enemy's course of action.
Right.
Well, they're kind of pretty straightforward. They have a rough idea of what they're going to
Aren't
do.
these regular orcs?
I think it's both.
Step 3 is going to be then to determine where to kill the enemy, which is once again in that
Pretty
valley-like
specific, yeah.
area. Step 4 is going to be plan and integrate obstacles. I think that's where they fail right here, is that they have the opportunity to put obstacles and integrate that with their direct fire measures. Then step 5 is going to be in place weapon systems. They're in place there. Their weapon systems are themselves and their bow and arrows. Step 6 is in place and plan indirect fire. They don't have any indirect fire here due to maybe capabilities, but if they don't have that, the indirect fire can be like in here, catapults, right?
Okay.
Lord of the Rings, catapults, anything that can launch over the air in a long arc, basically.
And they kind of try to do that with the bows you'll see later on, but it's definitely not as effective as actual catapults
Right.
would have been.
And then step 7, rehearse. I don't think they rehearsed, but we'll get through that.
If they had the time and the manpower to set up those obstacles and things like that, they could have stopped them a little further away so that they didn't even get to the castle, and they maybe could have used the high ground that's on the sides with indirect fires if they had that, but they don't.
They're also low on troops, though.
And these are people who focus on cavalry. First of all, they're not in their regular fighting situation, and then you have them against such bad odds, and they're already at a disadvantage because they have less people than they usually would. They pigeonholed themselves into one of the worst locations that they could be at because they're depending on the fortress's ability to do half the battle for them. Yeah, so the weather is something that obviously you can't control, but in this particular instance, the weather probably favors the defense.
100%.
Just because moving the ladders and moving all their equipment and stuff,
Well, yeah.
slipperiness doesn't help.
At the end of the day, when it comes to a defense, you can definitely significantly take on a lot more troops than you have. Granted, usually you want to go to a 3-to-1 odds when you're the offense.
And they have a bit more command and control going on here than what we saw in the last battle. They're obviously more organized and more experienced than what we have seen. As soon as they start charging, they lose that order that they had as soon as they get away from their commanders.
Right.
Now they're bringing up their siege equipment. Don't know why they didn't start off with that, but I mean, that's okay. Look how strong these guys are.
Yeah.
They've been hitting the gym.
Is that something you do in battle?
I wish.
Lay on the ground.
Slide yourself across the ground so you can hit him in the crotch. Cause see, again, we have the pausing in the middle of the battle to have a conversation. The orcs aren't ladder certified like me.
Now this is a great example of a breach.
You see a giant guy with a sparkling torch following up 2 giant balls filled with something. I know they don't know what explosives are, but you would think that someone would be like, that's kind of strange behavior. But Aragorn is the only one who notices that. You would think that they would have someone watching the one weak spot.
But we wouldn't get this great breach.
Do it for the breach, baby.
So, the tenets of breaching, it's called Sosra. So, it's going to be suppress, obscure, secure, reduce, assault. They got the suppression down because they clearly were able to get to that weak point. Obscuration was basically none because they saw that guy trying to go in to finish and complete the breach.
They were obscured by lack of knowledge about what they were even using.
And then you have secure. They definitely secured it because they were able to then go to the breach site to conduct the breach. Reduce, they reduced the that. And then we're about to watch them assault through. So overall for in the breach, I mean, they hit 4 out of 5 points, which is 4 out of 5 stars for me. Good job, breach boys.
Good breach. Would you recommend that?
I thought he was gonna get skewered.
Wouldn't have jumped that high even if there weren't people to fight at the bottom. That was just a high jump. I'm afraid of heights.
Well, this is good though because they're destroying the tempo of the offense right here.
And you can also see Aragorn's experience working with elves. He knows their tactics, he knows how they fight, and he knows how to lead them.
That's called sliding kill.
It's called seizing the opportunity. It is cool.
Yes.
One cannot deny the coolness. I wouldn't be able to do that while not shooting bows and arrows.
I think the best equivalent is if my tank was sliding on some ice and I was engaging the enemy while we were drifting.
And would you do that?
I would 100% do that. No, but it is hard to withdraw when you, aren't bounding and you don't have basically a force that's conducting security for you. So that's accurate.
What, dying when you try to retreat?
If you don't
Tactical
have everything
withdrawal.
set up, yeah.
Doesn't even have to be everything set up. A withdrawal is hard to do. That's really just at the end of the day, it's hard.
Now that they've been
breach
breached at 2 points.
Well, they haven't completed the breach. They haven't secured it, to be honest.
Oh,
And
okay.
we'll see this
Yeah.
coming up.
Bad breach boys.
Well, less successful breach boys.
They're trading space for time, because they're losing space here, but they're delaying the enemy from actually fully taking over. This breach goes into the daytime. I mean, it's taking a long time. And sieges aren't easy. At the end of the day, they took way too long. So, cavalry is incredibly effective against swordsmen when it comes to medieval tactics. I know that for a fact. Due to the surprise and audaciousness of their counterattack, they just can't react in time.
But it's kind of like a last hope effort because, once again, they know that they're just trying to buy time. They're trying to protect the women and children as well. They're trying to keep them away from that as long as possible.
Now, the true counterattack has come.
But it was also, they used that kind of as a distraction. They pulled all the attention away from where Gandalf was coming in with the reinforcements. So it's a good choice.
So right here, you're going to see the orcs try to conduct a reverse slope defense. That's essentially when you're on the downhill and the offense is attacking you from the uphill. It's not necessarily giving you the disadvantage. A defense is a good defense in general, but this reverse slope defense doesn't really go well for them, especially because the offense is mounted.
I wouldn't want to walk down that hill, let alone ride a horse down it, I guess.
No, and these horses, I mean, like, let's be real.
Champions.
These horses are going to get schwacked. I think overall it shows you, once again, the characteristics of both the offense and defense. And introduces a breach, which is great. We got to talk about engagement area development and why it's important. At the end of the day, I think I'd give that scene probably like a 7, just because even if they didn't mean it, it's got some good stuff. Got the breach boys.
I will say that I think the best part is the cavalry assault at the end there, and utilizing their terrain and the weather and everything, that they really did a good job with their battlefield analysis. It does a good job of showing where their priorities lie because they knew that they were likely going to die. So they weren't as worried about losing their own casualties and things like that. They were more focused on what their main goal was, which was buying time for the women and children and buying time for Gandalf to be able to come in. So it gets an 8 out of 10. For me.
It's that interplay of using tactics and using a battle in order to tell the story.
And they do a good job of mixing in little bits of the characters, like kind of make it easier to watch.
They pace these battles very well, and sometimes that does pull away from like the actual tactical accuracy of it. I don't think it takes away enough that it's a problem.
The most interesting thing about this battle, from my perspective, is that Denethor at this point is already kind of crazy. So you get to see how that leader, who isn't in control at all, like created the same dire circumstances that you had from a leader who eventually turns the tables and is competent by the time that he's actually fighting the battle. But you get to see that power that that leader has, that they both had the same dire circumstances, but they approached the battle very differently.
So it's like the way that the leadership can affect the way that a battle plays out.
And that's true in any fight and battle, is the leadership is incredibly
Can confirm.
important.
So this is some good psychological warfare, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they do a great job at integrating their fires, first starting with their indirect fires, because that's got the longest range, then going into their mid-range, which we're going to see soon. And they're utilizing all the domains, right? You got air and land specifically for these guys.
They don't have sea, but it's just because there's no water.
There's no sea.
And they do have their catapults. They do have some stuff, but they just weren't ready.
And now they have aerial.
Which is an intimidation thing too, because the Nazgul are terrifying. They didn't have any air defense capabilities. They weren't ready to deal with Nazgul, even though they knew the Nazgul existed.
Gandalf
Human
just
years?
slaying.
Gandalf's awesome.
He's reaping souls.
Gron doesn't really need to be on fire. Like, that doesn't...
But he wants to be.
But I love how cool that is. I don't know if you guys make a lot of speeches on the battlefield.
No, we just curse at each other.
We do the speeches before we start.
I don't know about the tactical value of, like, getting it within sight of the enemy and then stopping.
Yeah, they maybe should have paused to do this. Maybe even like a couple feet back. The orc army is set up to face Minas Tirith, so even if they can physically turn, all of their equipments and their catapults and things like that aren't facing the right direction to be able to counter that.
So the surprise really...
Yeah. And it's audacious. They sort of lose their formation a little bit, but it's hard to keep a formation.
Yeah.
No, they still kept their wedge. At the end of the day, it's a wedge formation,
Yeah.
right? You're going to pierce through the enemy real easily. What they do great is combined arms. They have the infantry, they have cavalry, they have tank, they have siege equipment. They do a great job at integrating all these different types of equipment and troops into the battlefield.
And also, like you mentioned earlier, there's always new things coming out of Mordor.
Mordor is great at innovating. Good on them. These guys are really incompetent at fighting. They're good at dying, though.
No plan survives first contact with the enemy.
That is true.
And no one expects Oliphants.
That is a tenet of the U.S. Army, I hear.
I don't think it's a good idea to lay underneath your horse, but those are heavy, I think. See,
Literally.
Now you see the navy that they were missing earlier, the sea aspect. No. But I think that a large part of this battle is just, okay, it's turning this way and then something new is added, it's turning that way. And that's kind of how this fight goes. It's just the back and forth of who can surprise the other one better.
It's just they happen to have the last surprise.
Yeah.
And from a cinematic standpoint, it is just the like ramping up of tension.
Yeah.
Whereas you keep upping the stakes every single time. This is accurate, right?
No.
Audacious.
Audacious.
Don't get how he's sticking on, but whatever.
He's got magnet boots. This is a good battle, and I enjoy it. But I don't think it's quite as satisfying as Helm Deep, where it really is just like, alright, and then they won.
Well, at Helm's Deep, they did have the final card up their sleeve. It wasn't a battle of upping the surprise, it was a holdout until the last man.
Right.
Suddenly you have reinforcements. There's Oliphants. They were on the field.
Yeah.
You can see for miles. There is no way they snuck up on them.
There was a little bit of dust in the air.
Not enough.
So, how are you ranking that one?
6.
5.
They did a good job of showing like air superiority in the beginning and things like that, but as fight went on, like we were talking about, it just became who has the next thing.
Large scale combat wise, it's just kind of everywhere, like you guys were saying.
Because it wasn't a matter of tactical superiority like it was in Helm's Deep. It was a matter of who has the biggest and best thing.
Which is how a lot of fights go, but it doesn't do a good job of showing off their tactical strategic brilliance.
I like the way that each battle was used differently story-wise.
Yes.
Yeah. And when it comes to these comparisons, it's not going to be 100% accurate. We're extrapolating as much as we can. These tactics and doctrine that we're taking is from modern day U.S. tactics and doctrine, which apply to large-scale combat in the modern day.
Principles remain the same. Sometimes the way we think about them have changed, though, because like we have a standardized way that we look at things.
Right.
Even the older men who were experienced with fighting, probably because they'd done that earlier in their lives, are still not going to think about things the way that we think about things now.
I hope I can get you guys on the channel again sometime, so if you guys have any ideas for what you want to hear them talk about, or if you want to see them talk about any other fights or battles in The Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, or in anything else, let me know in the comments so I can bring them back. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a like because it really helps out the channel. Subscribe so that you don't miss a single video. I put out a video every single week, sometimes with very fun people and sometimes with just me. If you'd like to donate to the channel, the link to my Ko-fi virtual tip jar is in the description, and all proceeds go towards the channel and making it better. Thank you all so much for joining me this week, and I hope that you all have a very happy Hobbity day.